Oil prices have hit $115 a barrel. Gasoline and diesel costs spiked 20% in a matter of hours. Out in the open ocean, global maritime transit has simply flatlined. Following escalating U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran, the Strait of Hormuz has completely shut down. Insurance companies immediately pulled all war risk coverage for the area, forcing shipping to a dead stop. This visualization shows 20 million barrels of crude oil and refined products. That is the exact amount of energy that has vanished from global circulation every single day since the blockade began, equaling exactly 20% of total global daily energy demand. Losing 1/5 of the world's energy supply overnight puts the global economy in immediate peril, making this the largest instantaneous supply disruption in human history. The global economy has survived energy shocks before, but the scale of those historical events looks small compared to the current crisis. During the 1956 Suez crisis, a regional conflict shut down a major shipping canal, disrupting roughly 10% of global supply. 17 years later, the 1973 Arab oil embargo blocked 7% of global supply, causing widespread economic panic and strict fuel rationing. In 1990, the Gulf War wiped out another major chunk of production, removing about 9% of daily global demand from the market. This chart shows those historical single-digit percentage drops stacked up against the severity of the 2026 Hormuz blockade. The current crisis has severed 20% of the world's supply, more than double the size of the worst historical shocks. Because previous global recessions were triggered by supply drops half this size, economists have no historical playbook for surviving a 20% deficit. To understand this severe deficit, we must look at the Persian Gulf supply chain. Major oil producers like Iraq, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia all rely on a specific maritime route to export their energy. This map shows bright lines of oil flowing from those nations, all bottlenecking into a single 21-mile stretch of water called the Strait of Hormuz, before reaching heavily dependent markets like China and India. Normally, the market relies on spare capacity. Spare capacity is the extra oil that major producers deliberately keep in reserve to stabilize global markets during a crisis. As you can see, the world has millions of barrels of this backup supply sitting inland across Saudi Arabia and the UAE. But the geography of this crisis creates a trap. Because the Strait of Hormuz is blocked, Saudi Arabia and the UAE's spare capacity is physically locked inside the Gulf. There are alternative bypass pipelines that pump oil out to the Red Sea. However, they can only move a fraction of what's needed, falling drastically short of replacing the 20 million missing barrels. The world's emergency fail-safes are trapped behind the exact same locked door as the primary supply. Because of this geographic bottleneck, the effective global spare capacity is essentially zero. To survive the blockade, the United States and the International Energy Agency are deploying their last remaining tool, a historic, coordinated release of 400 million barrels from strategic petroleum reserves. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve is a finite emergency stockpile of crude oil maintained by governments to prevent supply shocks. But this emergency band-aid has a critical flaw. These reserves mostly hold unrefined crude oil, not the immediately usable refined products like diesel and jet fuel that power the global supply chain. The math is grim. Dividing the 400 million barrel reserve by a 20 million barrel daily deficit means the buffer runs dry in exactly 20 days. When reserves empty, the market forces demand destruction. Prices rise so high that consumers cannot afford energy, halting activity. Until the geopolitical conflict is resolved and the strait reopens, the global economy remains held hostage by a 21-mile stretch of water, accelerating a brutal and unavoidable reckoning for the world's energy dependency.